Hi, everybody. Chris Munn here, County Legislator for Red Hook, Tivoli, and the northern part of Rhinebeck. Here again with another conversation. If you want to hear more of these, don't forget to click like, follow, share, etc., etc. It always helps to get the information out. So today I am having a conversation with my colleague, Lisa Kaul. She's a Dutchess County Legislator, like myself, representing District 6 in the town of Poughkeepsie. How are you this morning?
Good, thank you.
Great. Uh, just can you just remind me, like, what part of town of Poughkeepsie are you representing? Like, what section?
Yes, so it's District 6, completely in the town of Poughkeepsie. It's the area around Vassar College, a bit of Spackenkill Road, bit of Vassar Road, and then it comes down towards Route 55 and around Friendly Lane, so Arthur S. May School in that area.
All right. So I just wanted to say, Legislator Kaul's a freshman in the legislature, and she certainly hit the ground running. Very impressed by all the work you've been doing. I got to say, I know I know the rest of our colleagues agree. Very thorough, lots of questions on the floor, which is not surprising sometimes from a freshman. Learning a lot, right?
Learning a
But
lot,
and I remember,
yes.
I remember doing the same. Half of my half of my floor time, my first term was, I'm new here. I'd like to ask a question. And a lot of times, I think a lot of the longer serving legislators who had never asked those questions, came up to me later. They're like, "Oh, I didn't realize that was the way things worked." So it's always good to have new people asking new questions. So today we're going to talk a little about transparency and oversight, which is one of the things that we try to do in the legislature. Um, and we're going to talk more specifically about these financial disclosures and ethics disclosures that many people in the county government, including ourselves, are required to fill out, but others are not. So, Legislator Kaul approached me at an event recently, or a few months ago, and asked me about a couple of agencies. So, why don't you talk a little about what we were talking about?
So we had a resolution in front of us where we were going to decide on which the agencies and officials were who needed to complete a financial disclosure form. And I was just curious about the sort of disparities or discrepancies and who was missing and who was on it. So, for example, the resolution delineated very clearly all the officials, elected officials, people in the civil service were required to complete this. But then we had the IDA, the LDC, that's the Industrial Development Agency, the Local Development Corporation, Dutchess County Resource Recovery Agency, Water, Wastewater Authority, and Dutchess Community College. And it seemed like they only had their executive directors where he needed to complete the form, whereas in some cases we had the board of directors, in addition to the executive director, had to complete it, and in others it didn't. And so I was trying to understand what the principle was underlying it, whether there was a rubric or a parameter, and why there was discrepancy.
So, a little history on this was back in 2019 is when the legislature passed all this. I was in the legislature, I was actually in leadership at the time, and we passed a pretty sweeping ethics reform law to codify a lot of this, and it included these financial disclosures, which are pretty thorough. If we own shares in a company or our family, owns, part of a company that does business with the county, we have to disclose that. The people like the person who's, the commissioner of public works, in charge of the roads, if he had family members, which as far as I know, he does not, if he had family members that did paving, right? I mean, that might be a concern. You would want to know that. You want to have that exposed. So when we passed this originally, all those agencies and all the members were actually required to do that, which we discussed. And about a year later, so it was during the COVID year, they came back. The Republicans came back and pulled out the IDA, the LDC, or Resource Recovery Authority, and the water group.
Just the board members, right?
Well, it went to where it is now, right? So, but the IDA and the LDC, the members were not required, and that was my biggest concern at the time because this was the group that was handing out tax breaks. So I mean, you want to know if the business relationships that these people have with other businesses. This is information the public should have. I'm not saying anything untoward is going on, but how would we know if this information is not available? The resources to do this kind of research to look into these people's backgrounds would not be possible.
I was actually intrigued by this because we currently have a waste management crisis, right? And we have a huge public movement in our county asking us to rethink how we dispose of waste. And we're going to be making some pretty big decisions about the Resource Recovery Agency and the future of our incinerator. And it seemed to me, given that that's a political context, it just made sense, or rather, it was just behooved us to have complete transparency about the board members, just so that our constituents could trust what was happening. Again, not casting any aspersions, but really ensuring that we have everything in place such that the public can completely trust the organizations and agencies that are responsible for running, say, for example, our waste in this county.
I've been pushing to get the IDA and the LDC added back in for many years. Every year I would bring it up, and every year the Republicans would vote it down. And then out of nowhere, the Republicans approached our leadership, Democratic leadership, said, "Oh, is Chris going to put that thing forward again?" And they said, I believe so. I said, "Well, we'll support it this year," which was great. So we added them back in. I think it was last year, and then once that was done, this year looked like this was an opportune moment to add the other two. And the good news was that the Republicans were receptive.
I think the rubric hasn't changed when the code of ethics was put in. That sort of is the underlying principle, offers the underlying parameters for who's included. It essentially says that anybody who makes decisions that have to do with policy changes in the county need to be included. It just made sense for us to have clarity and parity around who is completing these financial disclosure forms. And as long as we had that, then we wouldn't be going back and forth every year based on the whim of a elected body to decide who gets included and who doesn't. There has to be some underlying clear principles that we're basing our decisions on.
And I thought that made a lot of sense. It did delay, perhaps adding these two boards, which, we postponed the vote, I think until April's meeting is when it's supposed to come forward. But I feel like this is a good step, and they've said they have no problem with the RRA and the Wastewater Authority going in. They did tell us that. We'll see if they stick to that, right? But so hopefully that'll be good news that we'll be able to talk about next month.
So even though we're in the minority, we can make a difference.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the thing, a lot of this stuff is common sense. When we can, we'll work across the aisle. It's obviously, if we can make progress, and we've done that in the past and we'll continue to do that in the future. So absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much for getting on with me this morning to talk about this. I know we're both irrationally enthusiastic about about transparency. And for anyone who's still watching, thank you so much for staying on and watching to the end of this. And thank you again for listening to this. And again, if you want more of these, just send me a message. Tell me who you'd like to have interviewed. Click like, share, subscribe, etc., etc., etc. And I'll see you again soon.
Thanks.